Hi gang, and welcome to another episode of Mr. Ed Makes, and in this episode I'm going to show you how to make a fairy house plug-in nightlight. Now I am super stoked and really excited. It might be hard to tell because I'm pretty chill most of the time, but I've been looking so forward to making this project and showing you guys how it's done. This is a nightlight, and it has a little base with a switch and a color changing LED inside, and when you turn it on it's magical. And then in the daytime it's just beautiful. So all the time you can enjoy this work. And it starts with gluing sticks or twigs, little twigs, to the housing of this nightlight. And I get these at the Dollar Tree, or you can get them at Walmart or Walgreens. They sell them in most places that have a houseware section. And I pull the housing off just because it makes it easier to work with. But when you do that, you want to be careful that you don't interfere with how it connects. So be mindful of that. But you just start fleshing out your frame for your house. You know, your back, you got your walls, you got your roof, you got your front roof and walls, and they don't have to be exact. In fact, if they're a little bit off, it will add to how whimsical it looks. And that's kind of what you want to do. You want to ride the line between realism and fantasy. You want it to be strange enough to be fantasy, but you want it to be normal enough to be identifiable. So if you ride that line carefully, it gives us this sort of whimsy, and that's what I like about it. It's a very organic kind of feel to it. It doesn't look like that it was made by a machine. It definitely does look like it was made by hand. And if you do it well, it's going to look like it's made by little fairies, because that's the whole point, is that this has been put together in the wilderness by these fantasy creatures that are living inside of it. So you kind of hold that theme in your head when you're putting it together. So I box out the roof shape. We've got those planes there, your traditional slope, and then I'm going to add an additional part to each side, which is kind of like a gable, which is basically the house shape made on the side of the house. So you have the front shape of the house, you just kind of rotate that 90 degrees and do it again on the sides, and join the ridges with a stick there, and you're going to make this crisscross kind of thing. I think I give a closer detail of this when it's finished, so you'll be able to tell what that framing looks like. But you can try putting them together with straws or something like that and get a basic idea with things that you can work with easily before you go gluing everything together, if you don't have a good idea of what you're doing, which is what I did when I first started. I used paper rolls, little rolled up tubes of paper, and made larger models and glued them together in a way and figured out how these shapes go together to make the house shape. Once you're done with the framing and you have it all the way you would like, if you wanted to be more elaborate on the larger models, if say you're not going to do a nightlight, you're just going to do a larger stand on a shelf model, you could frame out the windows and the doors, and that adds a lot of realism to it as well, but it also adds a lot of time and tedium. So if you want to do that, you can. If not, you can just wait till later to put in the doors and windows like I do here. So the next stage of the process is papering, and you're using tissue paper, and you're just cutting random pieces of size that will kind of fit across and make like this little bridge, where at least two edges of the tissue are supported by the sticks that are framed out on the side. And once you get a few pieces in place, then it's a lot easier to put smaller pieces in the gaps, and the paper helps support the other pieces of paper. And if it gets too soggy or wet, you can let it dry a little bit and then go back to it, and it kind of helps that way as well. But you want to cover all those surfaces, as paying a special detail to the roof, because there is that where the gables connect to the regular slope of the roof from the front view, there's that valley, and you want that to be really pronounced, and it's kind of hard to get that to show up well using just the paper mache decoupage technique. But you can do it if you play with it a little bit. It doesn't have to be exact, but it does have to be there. You want to tell that story that that front part is shaped a certain way and the back part's shaped a certain way. So once you've done with that, you can start adding the color. I use watercolor. I water it down a little bit so that it's not so strong, and kind of go back and forth. I go into the raw color, put some of that on. I go into the wash color, put some of that on, and make it look like it's old, like it's been rained on, and it's had the snow on it, and it's had the wind blow on it, and all the other things that distress the surface as it lives where it's supposed to be. And if you find some spots where the tissue isn't layered enough, I mean, you want 2 or 3 layers. You want some good thick heft, because this is thin tissue paper and you're building it up. You can do this later on to the thinner parts, or even build it up all over, even adding the color on at the same time. And that's actually another way that you can do this. If you'd like, you can just start with colored glue. It works sort of the same way. So after you're done with that, you're going to do the roof part, which you have to make shingles. I use cardstock, colored cardstock, 3 different colors. I use some pinking shears, and I cut strips that are just zigzag pink, or zigzag cut on one edge and flat or straight cut edge on the other. And the straight cut edge will be hidden by the shingle that sets above it. And when you get all the way up to the top ridge, you'll have that straight edge. That should meet it nicely. And start at the bottom of the roof and work your way up. I usually start at one side and work to the other, and I might alternate that after a couple rows, and just continue that process going upward. You may have to cut a few pieces to fit if you can't find one of the right color, of the right size to fit in the right space. It's okay to give them a few fine cuts and measurements to get that to fit. Otherwise, just kind of go with what the sizes that you have there. It'll look okay. If it looks rough and it's not perfectly lined up, that's just fine. And then once you're done with the shingling the roof, you'll want to do the ridge cap. And I do that in hot glue so that everything is nicely fixed there. There'll be a tendency for people to want to pick this up from the top, so I wanted to make sure that those pieces were affixed really well and that they weren't going to come apart. So the next part of the process is the windows and the doors. And I use a pin to mark those spots, and then a hobby knife to cut them out. Try to be careful not to rip any of the paper as you cut them out. You can use some tweezers and pull it up and kind of cut them off that way. It helps. If it starts to tear too much, you can patch that again with some glue and a little piece of tissue paper. And then once you're done opening those spaces up, you're going to want to frame them with some twigs, and you're just cutting those to fit, kind of framing them out that way. Tweezers help immensely, and putting just a tiny dab on the stick and then putting the stick in place seems to work the best. If you can do that, it may not always be possible, but I like to do that. I think it goes by the fastest. And using tweezers, I kind of clean up the excess glue if there is any, and use the tweezers to kind of push the paper from underneath up into the stick on the top so that there's a nice strong bond there. And then the next part will be the embellishments on the windows, and then there's these seed pods that you can see here. They're kind of concave on one edge, and I hot glue it and put some moss on there. These are all botanicals that you can buy at a florist shop, and I start putting those, fitting them, getting pieces to the right size. I want the door one to be the biggest piece, and kind of use a little twig to prop it up, and it adds a nice look to it. I think it's having this awning pole there. And you can take the awning pole up to the other ones if you want. You can even continue those on to the other sides if you want to as well. I just kind of limited that as a nice touch. And the piece that I cut out for the door, I've kept it, and I'm just covering it with sticks on the edge, framing it out, and that's going to be the door. Making sure that the sticks they're stuck well and they fit nicely, and that it has a nice shape to it. I'm using the twigs that have the most characteristics, so they have like little offshoots and stuff. It makes it look like it's a larger scale even though it is smaller. And then with a hobby knife I cut out a little window, and I leave one side open a little bit so that the light shines through, and I put a little cross member there so that it looks like the door is reinforced. And there you have it, fairy house nightlight. And just continue that for the other sides. Add a little bit of moss and some decoratives, for a little porch or a step area. Now the back I kept open on this one, and it shines light onto the wall. It looks really nice that way, but you could paper that surface and shingle it as well if you wanted to. You can do pretty much anything you want because there's no rules, and yeah, it's just up to you. Well, thanks for joining me for this project, and be sure to check out my other videos about projects like this and a variety of other media and subjects. If you like this video, please be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. Thank you for that, and until next time, as always, take care.